We aren't meant to live with little tiny rhythms. We're meant to have the full expression of our life. And some of our emotions are intensely heavy and difficult, and some are really light. And for some people, the light, happy ones are difficult. And then we'll go up and down. And so as long as you're able to manage all of that, then you're in the right place. Riding the emotional waves as an empath. Friends, it's Diane here at Someone Gets Me, and today we're going to talk about riding the emotional waves as an intensely sensitive or empathic or neurodivergent person. I'm twice exceptionally gifted, and I have a neurodivergence. And so part of that is high intuition and high empathy and extreme sensitivities. I'm sure you can relate to that. Some of us have difficulty with different sounds or noise, or so introverted people, it gets too people-y out there, right? There's all kinds of ways that we can experience our intense sensitivities and our uniqueness being a neurodivergent or gifted person. No two of us are the same. And that's why I think it's so important to keep talking about all the different aspects. So I'm sure you've heard stories in other parts of this podcast and others that have talked about all of these things, but I think it's important to remind us that the emotional waves can be very turbulent, very deep, and sometimes disconcerting for yourself and for those around you. Because you see, the people around you don't know what to do. They're truly powerless in the sense that they can't of themselves ease the situation, change the situation, or anything. They can simply support and love you as you ride the wave. And sometimes it feels more like a tornado. Yeah. So I want to talk about how we ride the wave, what to do, and to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. Now, in my entire life, which is several decades long now, I've had a lot of experience with riding these intense emotional waves. When I was younger, nobody understood, including me. I used to walk around thinking everything was wrong with me and why couldn't I do anything right? Well, I learned later that that isn't quite true, and that really it's what's right with me. It's my intense intuition and my empathy that makes me as excellent as I am at my work. So I don't know which picked me first. Did I choose the work or did the work choose me? But what I do know is one of my unique abilities is this intense sensitivity and intuition and empathic ability. But the waves go like this for me and most of my clients and people I know just in general talking, is we're going along just fine, right? Waters are smooth. And then all of a sudden it gets a little choppy. Now, if I was out racing a sailboat and it started getting a little choppy, we would maybe change the sails or change our tactics, or we would make some adjustment, especially if we were racing, because the waves being choppy means the wind is picking up. So for me, what I notice when things feel a little choppy or disconnected, I realize, okay, there's stressors that are picking up. There's internal, maybe messaging or old beliefs, or maybe there's external pressures happening that are making things a little bit choppy. So think about your life and think about how things are going smooth, and then all of a sudden, or maybe gradually, things get a little choppy. They get a little difficult. In sailboat racing, the boats load up. There's a lot more effort that goes into keeping the boat stable and going in the direction we want it to, especially if we're racing. And there's all of factors that we're on the same boat, but everything shifts. So in your neurology and in your biology and your own physical being, you're still going in the same direction, but everything seems to shift because your very sensitive neurodivergent self is trying to manage something that it's giving you signals or having struggle with, whether it's overstimulation or too much pressure or old belief system bleeding in. It still is adding that choppiness to your life. And that's not necessarily going to help any. Now, if you don't listen to that right away, and as I say to myself and others, whisper, roar, or 2x4. So the whisper is feeling a little off. The roar is when it gets really choppy. And the 2x4 is when we have what I call a tolerance break or a meltdown. Now, sometimes it's a day of crying or depression or overeating or undereating or doing something to try to get the system to regulate again. And most often, unless we're skilled at knowing what to do, we do something that's not as healthy as we would otherwise choose. So when we're in those places, it's really important, I believe, to say, okay, how can I be heard? And how can I feel connected to others, even when my system's having a hard time doing that? And so it's incredibly important that you have people in your life that actually hear you. They may not totally understand, and they hear you. Now, that you want people in your life to hear what you're saying, but we also want people in our lives to hear what we're not saying, what's not being verbalized. Because when a neurodivergent person gets overstimulated, sometimes words are difficult, or sometimes a word is used in a different manner than we would think. And so it gets all confusing. Or sometimes you don't want to have to totally explain everything. You just want someone to hear you. They don't even have to fix anything. I had a gentleman I was dating years ago, and every time I would say something about how I was feeling, he would try to fix it. And I finally said, you don't need to fix me or fix the problem unless I ask for your assistance. What's really important is that you hear me and you communicate back to me in a way I can understand that you actually hear me. And then once I was able to communicate that to him, everything worked out really well. In our relationship, when I was talking about things that were intense or sensitive, he would often say that, well, I guess you have more empathy than I. And that was an understatement. Yes, it's true. I have a lot of empathy and I feel very intensely about things that have to do with humans and human rights and animal rights and our earth. All of it, I feel very intensely. So if you're trying to push through like a neurotypical person, and no pain, no gain, keep pushing, what'll happen is you'll end up with a meltdown or a dark night of the soul. If it's a big spiritual lesson where things feel really dark and heavy. I know I used to always explain it like a big dark blanket would just get dropped over my head from behind me. And next thing I knew, I would be not feeling very good. Now, I'm sure you've experienced this too. I know I'm not the only one who goes through these things. And so we go through the darkness, but the key is to keep moving. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. That means be open and receptive. That means take care of yourself, meditate, walk, hang out in nature, talk to only trusted people who you really know can connect with you. Don't go to empty wells for water, and allow yourself to walk through whatever the dark difficulty is. Because here's one thing for sure. If you keep walking and you honor who you are because you are very unique and special and perfect in your own right, what happens is one day, boom, just like that, it lifts and you feel amazing and bright and you have great ideas and your inspiration is back, almost like that gooky, choppy darkness never even existed. Because what happens is when you do that and you keep walking through it, whatever that old stuff that needed to be cleaned out got cleaned out of your essence, of your energy, of your body. And now you're lighter. I know years ago I had a really dark time and I really thought I was broken. It was bad. And I knew how to get out of it mentally, but it was hard on my own, because we need people in our lives. And finally, one of my sailing friends came over to the house and said, "What is wrong with you? We haven't heard from you or seen you." And she was absolutely the last person that I thought was paying attention. Absolutely. I would never have guessed it. But because of that conversation, I said, this is the darkness I'm going through. And it was a really big spiritual epiphany evolution time. But as soon as I was able to connect with others and process and talk about it, my whole world changed for the better. And all of that darkness was totally worth it. Though when we're in it, it feels hopeless sometimes, or like I'll never get out of it, or I'm stuck here forever, or what happens if this is all there is? Our brain says all kinds of things. But the truth is, part of our transformation, our evolution, our health, our well-being as humans, and particularly those of us who are neurodivergent, is to experience all there is to experience and continue to uplift ourselves and transform ourselves so that ourselves and the whole world around us gets the blessing, gets the goodness, gets the yumminess of knowing that we've freed ourselves from whatever the stuff is. Now, that stuck feeling, that dark feeling, may not always have words to it. Sometimes you might feel just heavy and sticky, and you may not know what it is. Somebody might say, "How are you feeling?" or "What is it?" You'll say, "I don't know," and you're right, because a lot of it's nonverbal. So that's why I say keep moving. It's breathe, keep moving, not to run away, but to go through in order to come out. Because when we go through in order to come out, we transcend and then we transform like an alchemist all of the base feelings and stuff that's in there. And really that's what we want to do. We want to give ourselves permission to say, life is cruising right along and we're doing good and everything's wonderful. And then boom, something can happen fast, or it can be slow progression, maybe not sleeping well, or maybe just external stress, or maybe just overthinking yourself into this kind of choppy situation. So when things feel a little choppy or a little off or a little off kilter, then that's a time to start slowing down and breathing and saying, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to handle this? Now, sometimes it's not always easy just to slow down. Sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds, but we want to find protected, dedicated time for ourselves. I know I get challenged with that sometimes, with what am I going to do to take care of myself along the journey of writing books and doing this podcast and working with my clients and creating amazing things. And it's really fun to do all that. I love my work. I don't even call it work because it's so much fun and it still takes energy. So you can be doing something you love all the time. And at the same time, we want to take a little bit of a break or a little bit of a rest. There's all different kinds of rest that we can take in order to feel amazing and on point. So the point here is that we have emotional waves. All of us do. We live on a sine wave. The more neurodivergent or intensely sensitive or maybe empathic that you might be, the more intense some of these waves might be. Now, I know I called another gifted friend of mine years ago, and I said, oh boy, am I feeling it today. And you know what she said? She said, oh, you're just in the tornado. Just keep riding the ride and it will drop you in a minute. And then you'll wait, you'll open your eyes and the world will be different and it will be great. And so when she said that at first, I'm like, really? Ride the ride. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. This feels really yucky. But she was right. Because the moment I let myself surrender to the ride and let myself woo around with the tornado, then when it did stop, things were different, all for the better. Same thing with riding the waves. When I ride my emotional wave, people sometimes don't get it. I don't expect them to, though. I used to expect them to, but I don't anymore. And when I have people that I'm working with or friends that are riding their emotional waves, it might be a little tricky, right? Or they might be having a hard time. I had a coworker that was shutting down at work and having difficulty. And so we talked about it. And I said, it's okay to be shut down. And one of the belief systems that came out for her was she was telling herself it wasn't okay to shut down once in a while. And in her work, there's a lot of emergencies to deal with. And sometimes shutting the emotions down because of her very intensely sensitive self, being neurodivergent, she could give herself permission to tend to her work and do what she needed to while preserving her emotions. So sometimes shutting down a part of us knowingly, consciously helps us deal with something that's a crisis in our lives or an emergency, whether it's at work or family or whatever it is. We want to be able to know that we have full command of our faculties. We can be fully in, fully awake, fully alive, all of us showing up. And we also can choose different parts of us that we may want to put on the side, not get rid of or hide, but not have them be necessarily in the forefront. So when I'm dealing with a crisis, when I worked for years in crisis management and psychiatric hospitals and talking people down on bridges and things like that. When I had to do those kinds of things, my intensely sensitive self was really feeling it. But that part wasn't really going to help. I needed to have my emotional and mental faculties working really cleanly so that I could have the right words and the right cadence and the right care and love in order to help the person who was in an extreme crisis. Now, the key is, if you're in one of those kinds of positions where you have crises and you're doing what you need to help, then you want to have a way to debrief, a way to talk about it or process what was happening. And in that processing and talking, you can be heard, you can feel cared about, and then your needs are met as you just met the needs of others. So ride your emotional waves. Let's not try to hide them. We aren't meant to live with little tiny rhythms. We're meant to have the full expression of our life. And some of our emotions are intensely heavy and difficult, and some are really light. And for some people, the light, happy ones are difficult. And then we'll go up and down. And so as long as you're able to manage all of that, then you're in the right place. Sometimes we have to learn coping skills. Sometimes we have to look at, is there something else going on, right? But the idea is not to live flatline. That's not the idea. Anyway, so what I want you to know is that you are amazing. You are uniquely perfect just the way you are. So just know that, okay? So in the meantime, if you have any questions or you want to talk to me about this or any other topic, schedule a get to know you call. I am happy to spend some time with you so that we can discuss and experience and hear each other. I'm here for you, as I always have been and will be as long as I'm sucking air. So this is Diane at Someone Gets Me saying, remember to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. And remember that you are beautiful, you are lovable, and you are capable. You are deserving of a great life. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Diane saying, be well.